Imagine boarding a flight that should have taken less than 6 hours. You say goodbye to the people you love. You fasten your seatbelt. The cabin lights begin to dim, and the engines roar beneath your feet. Everything feels completely normal. Then, without a warning, without a distress call, without a single mayday, you disappear. Not just from radar, but from the world. For more than a decade, governments, aviation experts, military investigators, and millions of ordinary people have been asking the exact same question. How can a Boeing 777, one of the safest passenger aircraft ever built, simply vanish? No confirmed crash site, no final radio call, no clear explanation, just 239 people gone. Some believe it was a tragic accident. Others believe someone was controlling the aircraft long after it disappeared from civilian radar. And a few believe the truth has never been revealed. Because the deeper investigators looked, the stranger this mystery became. This isn't just the story of a missing airplane. It's the story of one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation history. A mystery that continues to challenge investigators even today. March 8, 2014. Kuala Lumpur International Airport. The clock is approaching midnight as passengers slowly gather at Gate C1. Some are laughing with family members before saying goodbye. Others are answering one last phone call or checking their boarding passes. Flight attendants welcome travelers with warm smiles, while the flight crew completes the final preparations inside the cockpit. Outside, under the bright airport lights, a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 waits quietly on the tarmac. It looks no different from the thousands of commercial flights that take off safely every single day. No one at the airport notices anything unusual. No one sees a warning sign. No one imagines that within a few hours, this ordinary flight will become one of the greatest aviation mysteries the world has ever known. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 is scheduled to fly from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, carrying 227 passengers and 12 crew members. It's a familiar route, flown countless times before. Everything appears routine. Everything appears normal. But before the sun rises, Flight MH370 will disappear, and the world will begin searching for answers that may never be fully found. The aircraft assigned to Flight MH370 was a Boeing 777-200ER, one of the most trusted passenger jets ever built. Since entering service, the Boeing 777 had earned an outstanding safety record. Pilots respected it, airlines relied on it, and millions of passengers boarded one every year without a second thought. Inside the cockpit sat Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah, a veteran pilot with more than 18,000 hours of flying experience. Beside him was First Officer Farik Abdul Hamid, a young pilot steadily building his career under the captain's guidance. Together, they had flown this route many times before. To them, this was just another routine overnight flight. As passengers settled into their seats, the cabin slowly grew quiet. Some watched movies, some listened to music, while others closed their eyes before the aircraft even left the ground. Parents checked on their children, flight attendants completed their final safety checks, and the atmosphere felt calm and familiar. Outside, the last ground vehicles pulled away. The cargo doors were locked. The pushback tug eased the aircraft away from the gate. At exactly 12:41 a.m., Flight MH370 began its journey. Moments later, the massive Boeing 777 accelerated down the runway, its powerful engines pushing nearly 300 tons of aircraft into the night sky. The wheels lifted off the ground, and the city lights of Kuala Lumpur slowly faded beneath the clouds. Inside the cabin, nobody applauded. Nobody felt afraid. To everyone on board, this was simply the beginning of another ordinary flight. As the aircraft climbed higher, every instrument inside the cockpit indicated that everything was operating exactly as it should. Every system was normal. Every reading was stable. Nothing appeared unusual. Nothing hinted that this flight was about to become one of the greatest mysteries in aviation history. For the next several minutes, MH370 followed its planned route toward the South China Sea. Air traffic controllers watched the aircraft move steadily across their radar screens, while the flight crew responded calmly and professionally to every instruction they received. Everything sounded routine. Everything sounded perfectly normal. And that's exactly what makes the next few moments so difficult to explain. Because in less than 40 minutes, a single radio transmission would become one of the most analyzed sentences in aviation history. Just 5 simple words. Words that investigators would replay countless times, journalists would quote for years, and families would never forget. Those 5 words would become the last confirmed message anyone would ever hear from Flight MH370. At 1:19 a.m., everything still seemed completely normal. Flight MH370 had reached the edge of Malaysian airspace, where it was scheduled to be handed over to air traffic controllers in Vietnam. It was a routine procedure that happened every single day. Thousands of international flights made the same transition without a second thought. Nothing about this moment stood out as unusual. Inside the control tower, a controller calmly picked up the radio and gave the next instruction. Malaysia 370, contact Ho Chi Minh Control on 120.9. Good night. A moment later, the captain replied in a calm, steady voice. Good night, Malaysian 370. 5 simple words. Nothing sounded strange. There was no panic, no hesitation, and no sign that anything was wrong. No one listening to that transmission could have imagined they had just heard the last confirmed words ever spoken from Flight MH370. Seconds later, the aircraft crossed into Vietnamese airspace. The next step should have been simple. The pilots only needed to check in with the next air traffic controller. It was a routine radio call that normally took just a few seconds. But this time, the call never came. At first, nobody was concerned. Small communication delays happen all the time. Controllers assumed the crew was busy and would respond within a minute. They waited. 10 seconds passed, then 30, then an entire minute. Still nothing. Vietnamese controllers called the aircraft. No response. They tried again. Silence. They called once more. Nothing. Inside the control center, confusion slowly began to replace confidence. Flight MH370 should have been exactly where the flight plan said it would be. It should have been checking in, just like every other aircraft in the sky that night. Instead, the radio had gone completely silent. Then something even more unsettling happened. The aircraft disappeared from civilian radar. Not gradually, not because of bad weather, not because of a technical warning. One moment, the radar target was there. The next, it was gone. Controllers refreshed their screens, believing it had to be a system error. They checked another display. Still nothing. A Boeing 777 doesn't simply disappear. Not in controlled airspace. Not without an emergency. Not without a distress call. Within minutes, phone lines between Malaysia and Vietnam were buzzing as both control centers tried to figure out what had happened. Each side believed the other might still be in contact with the aircraft. Neither one was. Somewhere in the darkness, 239 people were aboard an airplane that had suddenly fallen completely silent, and no one knew why. But investigators were about to uncover a discovery that would completely change the direction of the case. Because although Flight MH370 had disappeared from civilian radar, it had not disappeared from every radar. And what military radar revealed next would become one of the most shocking twists in the history of modern aviation. Military radar told a very different story. Just minutes after Flight MH370 disappeared from civilian radar, military operators detected something they never expected to see. The aircraft was still flying, but it wasn't heading toward Beijing anymore. Instead, it had turned around, almost completely. Somewhere between the last radio transmission and the moment it vanished from civilian radar, someone or something had changed the airplane's course. Investigators still don't know exactly why. The aircraft crossed back over the Malay Peninsula. It passed over populated areas. It flew for hundreds of miles. And yet, no distress call was ever made. No emergency code was transmitted. No passenger managed to send a message. The silence was almost impossible to explain. Then the aircraft continued northwest toward the Andaman Sea. Eventually, even military radar lost it. Once again, MH370 had disappeared. By sunrise, Families were already waiting inside Beijing Capital International Airport. Arrival screens still showed the flight. People stood near the terminal doors, expecting to see their loved ones walk through at any moment. Some held flowers. Others carried small gifts. Children looked toward every opening door, believing their parents would appear. But the doors never opened for flight MH370. As the hours passed, confusion slowly turned into fear. Airlines tried contacting the aircraft. Nothing. Authorities searched the planned route over the South China Sea. Nothing. Ships were deployed. Aircraft filled the skies. Rescue teams searched thousands of square miles of ocean. Still nothing. Then came another unexpected discovery. Although the airplane had vanished from radar, communication satellites had quietly detected faint electronic signals from the aircraft. These signals, later known as satellite handshakes, suggested something astonishing. MH370 had continued flying for several more hours after disappearing. Not for minutes, for hours. That single discovery changed everything. Search crews realized they had been looking in the wrong place, and the investigation expanded across one of the largest and most remote stretches of ocean on Earth. Years passed. Pieces of the aircraft were eventually found on distant beaches along the western Indian Ocean. But the main wreckage, the flight recorders, and the answers everyone desperately wanted were never found. To this day, no one can say with complete certainty what happened inside Flight MH370 that night. Was it a tragic mechanical failure? A deliberate act? A catastrophic chain of events investigators still haven't uncovered? Or is the truth still resting beneath the depths of the Indian Ocean, waiting to be discovered? More than a decade later, 239 people remain part of one of aviation's greatest unsolved mysteries. A flight that departed like thousands before it. A routine journey. A calm night. 5 final words. And then, silence. Perhaps one day, the ocean will finally reveal its secret. Until then, Flight MH370 remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in aviation history.